He left me sitting alone at that resort dinner table, surrounded by strangers and flickering candlelight, while he walked out without looking back. I felt every single pair of eyes on me, burning into my skin like I was the punchline of a joke I didn't even know I was part of. But here's what he didn't know. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. And by the time the sun came up the next morning, his bags were waiting for him at the airport departure gate, and I was sipping champagne by the pool. This is the story of how I turned the worst night of my life into the moment I finally got my power back. It all started 3 months before that trip. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for 6 years. 6 years that had slowly, quietly turned from passionate and exciting to routine and cold. We weren't fighting, which I thought was a good thing at the time. But looking back, I realized we weren't really talking either. We were two people living parallel lives under the same roof, passing each other in the hallway with polite nods and half-hearted smiles. I kept telling myself it was just a phase, that all marriages go through rough patches, that we just needed to reconnect. So when Daniel suggested we book a weekend getaway at this exclusive luxury resort about 2 hours from the city, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was it. This was the reset button we desperately needed. I spent weeks looking forward to that trip. I bought a new dress, a soft blue number that hugged my curves in all the right places. I got my hair done, my nails painted a deep burgundy. I packed carefully, folding everything with the kind of care you reserve for things you think matter. I imagined us walking along the beach at sunset, holding hands like we used to. I imagined late-night conversations on the balcony, wine glasses in hand, rediscovering each other the way we had when we first fell in love. I imagined him looking at me the way he used to, like I was the only woman in the world. I know it sounds naive now, but hope does that to you. It makes you believe in things that maybe aren't there anymore. The resort was everything the website promised and more. Towering palm trees lined the entrance, and the lobbies smelled like jasmine and luxury. Our room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, and the bed was so big and plush it felt like sleeping on a cloud. I stood on the balcony that first afternoon, breathing in the salt air, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, and I thought, this is going to work. This is where we turn things around. Daniel was inside unpacking, and I could hear him moving around, the sound of zippers and drawers opening and closing. I turned to say something to him, something light and hopeful, but when I walked back into the room, he was on his phone. Again, always on his phone. His face was illuminated by the blue glow of the screen, his thumb scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. I felt a little pang of disappointment, but I pushed it down. We just got here, I told myself. Give it time. That evening, we had reservations at the resort's signature restaurant. It was the kind of place where everything felt important, where the silverware was heavy and the napkins were folded into swans. I wore my new blue dress and felt beautiful, or at least I tried to convince myself I did. Daniel wore a white linen shirt and dark pants, and he looked handsome, the way he always did. We walked into the restaurant together, and for a moment, I let myself believe we looked like one of those couples. You know the kind. The ones who still gaze at each other over candlelit dinners, who still laugh at inside jokes, who still touch each other like they can't get enough. But the moment we sat down, the illusion started to crack. Daniel barely looked at the menu. He ordered a whiskey neat and then pulled out his phone. I tried to start a conversation, asking him about work, about how he was feeling, about what he wanted to do tomorrow. His answers were short, clipped, distracted. I asked him to put the phone away, and he did, but his eyes kept drifting, like he was somewhere else entirely. I felt my chest tighten, that familiar knot of anxiety and frustration building in my throat, but I smiled. I kept smiling because that's what I always did. I smoothed things over. I made excuses. I pretended everything was fine even when it clearly wasn't. The first course arrived, some kind of scallop thing that probably cost more than our grocery bill for the week. I took a bite and tried to make conversation again. I told him the food was amazing. I told him the view was beautiful. I told him I was glad we came. He nodded. He said, "Yeah, it's nice." That was it. 2 words. I felt something inside me start to crack, but I held it together. I told myself he was tired, that he'd relax once we got through dinner, that tomorrow would be better. I was so good at lying to myself. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw something flicker across his face. Something I couldn't quite read. He picked it up, typed something quickly, and set it back down. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, pushing my scallops around my plate, feeling smaller and smaller with every passing second. The restaurant was full of couples, and I couldn't help but notice them. The way they leaned into each other. The way they laughed. The way they looked at each other like they actually wanted to be there. And then there was us. Silent. Separate. Strangers. The main course came, and I barely tasted it. Daniel was drinking more now, his second whiskey already half gone. I tried one more time. I reached across the table and touched his hand. "Daniel," I said softly, "talk to me. Please. What's going on?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a split second I thought maybe I'd gotten through. Maybe he'd finally open up. Maybe he'd tell me what was wrong so we could fix it. But instead, his face hardened. He pulled his hand away. And then he said the words that would change everything. "I can't do this anymore." I felt the air leave my lungs. "What?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the soft jazz playing in the background. "This," he said, gesturing vaguely between us. "Us. I can't keep pretending." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Daniel, what are you talking about? We're here to fix things. We can work through this." He shook his head, and there was something cold in his eyes, something I'd never seen before. "There's nothing to fix. I'm done." And then he stood up. Just like that. He pushed his chair back, dropped his napkin on the table, and walked out of the restaurant. I sat there, frozen, my hand still hovering in the space where his had been. I could feel every single person in that restaurant staring at me. The couple at the table next to us had stopped mid-conversation. The waiter approaching with the dessert menu slowed his steps, unsure of what to do. I felt my face burning, my throat closing up, my hands trembling. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. But I couldn't move. I just sat there, alone at that table, surrounded by half-eaten food and the ruins of what I thought was my marriage. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been 2 minutes or 20. Time felt strange, like it was moving too fast and too slow all at once. Eventually, the waiter came over, his face full of pity. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" he asked gently. I nodded, even though nothing was all right. I asked for the check, my voice shaking. I signed it in a daze, my hand barely able to hold the pen. And then I walked out of that restaurant with whatever dignity I had left, my head held high even though inside, I was completely shattered. I made it back to our room, and Daniel wasn't there. I stood in the middle of that beautiful room with its ocean view and its expensive sheets, and I finally let myself break. I cried. I cried so hard my whole body shook. I cried until my eyes were swollen, and my throat was raw. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the man I thought I knew, for the future I thought we were building. And when I was done crying, when there were no more tears left, I felt something else start to take hold. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculating kind. The kind that clears your head and sharpens your focus. He had humiliated me. He had abandoned me in front of a room full of strangers. He had thrown away 6 years like they meant nothing. And I realized, sitting there on the edge of that bed, that I was done being the woman who just took it. I was done being the one who made excuses, who smoothed things over, who pretended everything was fine. If Daniel could walk away from me like that, then I could walk away too. But I was going to do it my way. I picked up the phone and called the front desk. My voice was steady now, calm, controlled. "Hi, this is Mrs. Patterson in room 412. I need to make some arrangements for tomorrow morning." The woman on the other end was polite and professional. I explained the situation, well, a version of it. I told her my husband needed to check out early, that there had been a change of plans, and that I needed his bags packed and sent to the airport. She didn't ask questions. Money talks, especially at places like this. I gave her his flight information, which I knew by heart because I'd been the one to book this whole damn trip in the first place. She assured me everything would be taken care of. I thanked her, hung up, and for the first time that night I smiled. Not a sad smile, not a broken smile. A real, genuine smile. Because I was taking my power back. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay in that massive bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the waves crashing against the shore outside. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the door open. Daniel stumbled in, and I could smell the alcohol on him from across the room. He didn't turn on the lights. He just moved quietly to his side of the bed and lay down, keeping as much distance between us as possible. I stayed perfectly still, my eyes open in the darkness, and I didn't say a word. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to demand an explanation, to ask him how he could do this to me. But a bigger part of me knew that it didn't matter anymore. Whatever explanation he could give, whatever excuse he could manufacture, it wouldn't change anything. He had made his choice at that dinner table, and now I had made mine. When the first light of dawn started filtering through the curtains, I quietly got up. Daniel was still asleep, or maybe he was just pretending to be asleep. I didn't know, and I didn't care. I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the remnants of last night's tears. I did my hair and makeup carefully, methodically. I put on a white linen dress and sandals. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She looked strong. She looked calm. She looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. I grabbed my sunglasses and my book and left the room without making a sound. The resort was just waking up. The morning air was cool and fresh, and the sky was painted in shades of pink and gold. I walked down to the pool area and found a lounge chair with a perfect view of the ocean. I ordered coffee from a passing server, and when it arrived, I sat there sipping it slowly, watching the sun climb higher into the sky. It was peaceful. It was beautiful. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't thinking about Daniel. I wasn't thinking about the disaster of last night. I was just present, in that moment, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin and the gentle breeze in my hair. Around 8:30, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, but I knew it was from the resort staff. Everything has been arranged as requested. His luggage has been delivered to the airport. Confirmation number attached. I read the message twice, and then I did something I hadn't done in a very long time. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not a sad laugh, but a genuine, from-the-belly laugh that made a couple nearby glance over with curious smiles. I texted back a simple, "Thank you," and then I ordered champagne. Yes, champagne at 8:30 in the morning. Because why the hell not? This was my moment. The champagne arrived in a silver ice bucket, condensation dripping down the sides of the bottle. The server poured me a glass, the bubbles rising to the surface like tiny celebrations. I raised the glass to my lips and took a sip, and it was perfect. Cold, crisp, elegant. I felt like a woman in a movie, the kind who doesn't fall apart when life kicks her down, the kind who gets back up and orders champagne. I settled back into my lounge chair, opened my book, and started to read. I must have looked completely unbothered, completely at peace, because that's exactly how I felt. I didn't hear from Daniel all morning. I assumed he'd woken up, found me gone, and probably went to get breakfast or nurse his hangover or whatever it was he needed to do. I didn't care. I spent the morning by the pool, reading and swimming and ordering fresh fruit and pastries whenever I felt like it. Other guests came and went, couples mostly, holding hands and laughing. A few months ago, watching them would have made me sad. But now it just made me grateful. Grateful that I wasn't going to spend another day, another month, another year pretending to be happy with someone who clearly didn't want to be with me. Around 11 o'clock, my phone rang. Daniel. I stared at his name on the screen for a long moment, debating whether to answer. Finally, I swiped to accept. "Hello," I said, my voice calm and even. "Where the hell are you?" His voice was tight, angry, confused. "At the pool." "Why?" "At the pool? Are you serious right now? We need to talk." I took another sip of my champagne. "I don't think we do, actually." There was a pause. "What is that supposed to mean?" It means you said what you needed to say last night, Daniel. You're done, remember? You made that pretty clear in front of an entire restaurant. Look, I was drunk, I was stressed, I didn't mean... Yes, you did. I interrupted, keeping my voice steady. You meant every word, and that's okay. I'm not angry anymore. You're not angry? He sounded incredulous. Then why the hell are my bags at the airport? There it was. I smiled. Because you said you couldn't do this anymore. So I'm making it easier for you. You don't have to do this. You can leave. Your flight is at 2 o'clock. Everything's arranged. The silence on the other end of the line was so thick, I could almost touch it. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Smaller. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You walked out on me, Daniel. You humiliated me. You ended our marriage in the middle of a restaurant like it was nothing. So yes, I'm serious. Your bags are at the airport. The resort has already processed your early checkout. And I'm staying here for the rest of the weekend because I paid for this trip and I'm damn well going to enjoy it. This is insane, he said, his voice rising. You can't just... I can and I did. Have a safe flight, Daniel. And then I hung up. My hand was shaking a little, adrenaline coursing through my veins, but I felt amazing. Powerful. Free. He called back twice, but I didn't answer. I blocked his number, finished my champagne, and ordered another glass. I spent the rest of that day doing exactly what I wanted. I got a massage at the spa, a full 90-minute deep tissue that worked out knots I didn't even know I had. I had lunch at the beachside restaurant, fresh grilled fish, and a salad that tasted like summer. I walked along the shore, letting the waves lap at my feet, collecting shells like I was a kid again. And every single moment, I felt lighter. Like I was shedding layers of stress and sadness and resentment that I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten they were there. That evening, I went back to that same restaurant where everything had fallen apart the night before. I wore a different dress, a red one this time, because red felt like power and confidence, and I wanted to embody both. I requested a table by the window, and when the host seated me, I noticed a few familiar faces from the night before. The couple who had been sitting next to us. They glanced over, recognition flickering in their eyes, and I wondered what they thought. Did they pity me? Did they judge me? I decided I didn't care. I ordered a glass of wine, and the most expensive thing on the menu, and I savored every single bite. Halfway through my meal, the waiter who had served Daniel and me the night before approached my table. He was young, probably mid-20s, with kind eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said quietly. "I just wanted to say, what you're doing is really brave. A lot of people saw what happened last night, and well, we're all rooting for you." I felt my eyes well up, but this time they were good tears. Happy tears. I smiled at him and said, "Thank you. That means more than you know." He nodded and walked away, and I sat there feeling seen and supported in a way I hadn't felt in a very long time. I stayed at that resort for 2 more days. 2 glorious, peaceful, empowering days. I did yoga on the beach at sunrise. I read 3 entire books. I had conversations with strangers that reminded me how good it feels to connect with people. I laughed until my stomach hurt. I cried a little too, because healing isn't linear, and sometimes you need to let the sadness out before you can fully embrace the joy. But mostly I felt free. Free from the weight of a failing marriage. Free from the pretending. Free from trying to be enough for someone who had already decided I wasn't. On my last morning at the resort, I packed my bags slowly, taking my time. I stood on the balcony one last time, looking out at the ocean, and I made myself a promise. I promised that I would never again shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. I would never again ignore my gut when it told me something was wrong. I would never again stay in a situation that made me feel small and invisible and unworthy. I deserved better than that. I deserved love that was real and present and reciprocal. And if that meant being alone for a while, or maybe even forever, that was okay. Because being alone was so much better than being with someone who made me feel lonely. The drive home was long, but I didn't mind. I played music that made me feel alive, Songs I hadn't listened to in years because Daniel didn't like them. I stopped at a roadside diner and had pie and coffee and talked to the waitress about nothing and everything. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, steeling myself. I knew Daniel would be inside. I knew there would be conversations that needed to happen, logistics that needed to be sorted out. But I also knew that I was ready. I was strong enough to handle whatever came next. I walked into the house, and Daniel was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. He looked up when I came in, and his eyes were red. He'd been crying. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hoarse. I set my bags down and nodded. "Okay," I said. "Let's talk." We talked for hours. He apologized over and over, said he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd been going through something and he'd taken it out on me, that he wanted to fix things. And I listened. I really listened, but I also knew that some things, once broken, can't be put back together the same way. The trust was gone. The respect was gone. And most importantly, the version of me who would have accepted his apology and tried to make it work was gone too. She'd been left behind at that resort, at that dinner table, in that moment when everything fell apart. I told him I wanted a divorce. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. He didn't fight me. Maybe he knew it was the right thing, or maybe he was just too tired to argue. Either way, we agreed to separate amicably, to divide things fairly, to move forward with as much grace as we could muster. It wasn't easy. Divorce never is. But it was necessary. And every day that passed, I felt more certain that I'd made the right choice. Months later, after the paperwork was signed and the house was sold and we'd both moved into separate apartments, I found myself thinking about that weekend at the resort. About the woman I'd been when I arrived, hopeful and naive and desperate to save something that was already gone. And about the woman I'd become by the time I left, stronger and clearer and more myself than I'd been in years. That weekend had been the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me. The worst because it was the end of something I'd invested so much of myself in. The best because it was the beginning of me. I started therapy. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I took up painting, something I'd loved as a teenager but had given up because there was never enough time. I traveled alone to places I'd always wanted to see. I learned to enjoy my own company, to appreciate the quiet, to find joy in small moments. And slowly, gradually, I fell in love. Not with another person, but with my life. With the freedom to make my own choices, to follow my own path, to be unapologetically myself. People ask me sometimes if I regret how I handled things, if I wish I'd done it differently. And the truth is, I don't. Could I have handled it with more anger, more drama, more confrontation? Sure. But that wouldn't have been true to who I am. I handled it with dignity and strength and a little bit of poetic justice, and that felt right. He left me at that dinner table, vulnerable and humiliated. So I left him at that airport, with his bags and his consequences, and the realization that actions have repercussions. The biggest lesson I learned from all of this is that silence can be the loudest response. You don't always have to yell, or fight, or prove your point. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away with your head held high. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, thriving, becoming the person you were always meant to be. Daniel thought he was ending things that night at the resort. But really, he was setting me free. He was giving me permission to stop fighting for something that wasn't working and start fighting for myself instead. I'm happy now. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I didn't know was possible. I'm not saying my life is perfect or that I never have hard days, because I do. But I have peace. I have purpose. I have self-respect. And I have the knowledge that I can handle whatever life throws at me, because I've already survived one of the hardest things a person can go through, and I came out the other side stronger. So if you're reading this and you're in a situation that's making you feel small or invisible or unworthy, please know that you deserve better. You deserve to be with someone who chooses you every single day, who sees you and values you and treats you with respect. And if that person isn't in your life right now, that's okay. Because the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself. Invest in that. Nurture that. Fight for that. And when you do, everything else will fall into place. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. If this resonated with you, if you've been through something similar, or if you just needed to hear that it's okay to choose yourself, please hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me your story, because I promise you, you're not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real stories about real people navigating the messy, complicated, beautiful journey of life, make sure you subscribe to this channel. We're building a community here of people who believe in resilience, in growth, in the power of owning your story. And I'd love for you to be part of it. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and worthy of everything good this world has to offer. Don't ever forget that.